Good day everyone. Today I will discuss about the Title 11 of the Revised Corporation Code. It's specifically about the non-stock corporation. In Section 86, a non-stock corporation is an organization not created for profits. This means no part of its income can be given out as dividends. However, the corporation may still earn profit incidentally, and when it does, that money must be used to support the corporation's purpose, such as its program, activities, or operation. Also, the general rules for stock corporation apply to non-stock corporation, unless there are specific rules under this title that says otherwise. Section 87. Non-stock corporation can be organized for non-profit purposes, such as charitable, religious, educational, professional, and etc. All purpose must not be for profit. Section 88. The voting rights of members can be limited, expanded, or completely removed. This depends on what is written in the Articles of Incorporation or the bylaws. If nothing is stated, then each member gets one vote. Members may vote by proxy or someone votes on their behalf or by remote communication or in absentia if the bylaws allow it. This means member can participate and vote without being physically present. It can be via Zoom, Gmeet, and etc. Or they can be not present at all. Section 89. Membership in a non-stock corporation is a personal right. This means you cannot give, sell, or assign your membership like in stock corporation. This also means you cannot transfer your membership to another person unless the articles or the bylaws specifically allow it. Section 90. Membership may be terminated based on the rules in the Articles of Incorporation or in bylaws. Once a membership is terminated, the member loses all rights in the corporation, unless the governing documents provide some exceptions. Section 91. The number of trustees is set in the Articles of Incorporation or in bylaws. A non-stock corporation may have up to 15 trustees. Trustees serves for up to 3 years until their successors are elected. If a trustee leaves before their term expires, the replacement may only serve for the remaining unexpired term. Meaning, if the trustee serves for 2 years, the replacement may serve only for 1 more year. Independent trustees can also be elected, depending on the type of non-stock corporation. Unless the document says otherwise, members may directly elect the officers of the corporation.
These sections state that every non-stock corporation must always keep an update list of its member and their proxies at least 20 days before any scheduled election. It also allows that meetings, whether regular or special, may be held anywhere, even outside the place of the principal office, as long as proper notice is given to all members. However, it is required that the meeting must take place within the Philippine territory. Section 93, which explains how the assets of non-stock corporation are distributed when it undergoes dissolution. Here is the order of distribution. First, all debt and obligation must be paid. Second, asset that must be returned or transferred based on condition should be given back. Third, asset meant for charitable, educational, or similar purposes should be transferred to organization with similar goals. Fourth, any remaining asset are distributed based on what written in the article of incorporation or bylaws. Lastly, if none of those apply, the asset will be distributed according to a planned distribution approved under this chapter. Next, Section 94 explain how to adopt a plan for distributing the asset of dissolving non-stock corporation. The process involved three main steps. Number one, the Board of Trustees must first pass a resolution recommending a plan of distribution. Second, all members with voting right must be given written notice that includes the proposed plan and the date, time, and place of the meeting. Third, finally, the plan must be approved by at least two-thirds of the voting member present or presented by proxy. Section 95, which define a closed corporation. A closed corporation is one of has this characteristic. First, each share are owned by no more than 20 people. Second, it has restriction on transferring shares. Third, it does not offer its shares to the public or list them in the stock exchange. However, not all corporations can be closed corporation. Banks, insurance companies, public utilities, educational institutions, and corporations with public interest are not allowed to be organized as closed corporation. This section highlights that closed corporations are usually small privately owned business with limited shares. Section 96. Describe what may be included in the article of incorporation of a closed corporation. The classification of share, ownership requirements, and transfer restriction. The classification of director, where each class of stock may elect its own director, higher quorum or voting requirements than those normally required by law. This section also allows stockholders to the directly manage the corporation without the need for a separate board of directors. In this case, the stockholders are considered directors and take on all the responsibility and liabilities of directors. It may also state that officer or employees will be chosen directly by the stockholder instead of the board. This gives closed corporation more flexibility and control in managing their internal affairs. Section 97 focuses on restriction on the transfer of share in a closed corporation. This restriction must be clearly written in three places: the articles of incorporation, the bylaws, and the certificates themselves. If they are not stated in these documents, the restrictions are not binding on a buyer who purchased in good faith. The restriction should also not be too burdensome. Typically, they just give existing stockholder or the corporation the first option to buy share before they are sold to outsiders. This ensures that ownership in a closed corporation stay within a small trustee group of people.
In Section 98, issuance or transfer of stock in a breach of qualifying condition. In the cases contemplated number 1 and 2 and 3 in Section 98, the transfer is conclusive presumed to have notice of restriction or condition, and he is not allowed to prove lack of notice even if such is the fact. The corporation is beacon failed to register. Also, it may, at its option, register the transfer of the stock in the name of the transferee. In a number 4, the transfer, however, register shall be binding upon the corporation, notwithstanding such conclusive presumption, where it has been consented to by all the stockholders of the closed corporation, or or if the closed corporation has amended its article of incorporation as provided in section 102. In a number 5, the term transfer as used above includes donation as it is not limited. In a section number 98, issuance or transfer of stock in breach of qualified condition. In the cases contemplated number 1 and 2 and 3 of section 98, the transfer is conclusive presumed to have notice of the restriction or condition. Therefore, it is not allowed to prove lack of notice, even if such is the fact. The corporation cannot be compelled to register. Also, it may, at its option, register the transfer of the stock in the name of transfer. Number 4, the transfer, however, shall be binding upon the corporation, notwithstanding such conclusive presumption, where it has consented by all the stockholders of the closed corporation or even closed corporations amendment. Its article of incorporation as provided in section 102. The term transfer, as used above, includes donation and is not limited to a transfer for value. And number 6, hence, the conclusive presumption of notice applies to a dam. The breach of any restriction in the issuance or transfer of stock without prejudice to the right of the transferee under existing civil code. In a section 100, action taken by directors without meeting or improperly called meeting. In any of the four cases specified, the action by the directors of corporation without a meeting and deemed valid. The exception is when the corporation without a meeting is deemed valid. The exception when they laws provide otherwise. Under the number 2, ratification cannot take place where the action taken at meeting held without proper call or notice beyond the corporation power of the corporation. See section 44. Note that under the second paragraph, a written objection is required. Under section 52, an oral objection is sufficient to preserve the right of director to question the validity any action taken in meeting held without proper notice. In section 101, preemptive right in closed corporation. When we say preemptive right of stockholders in closed corporation shall extend to all stock to be issued, including reissuance of treasury shares, whether for money, property, or personal services, and a payment of corporation debts unless an articles of incorporation provide otherwise. And Section 102, Amendment of the Article of Incorporation. When we say in Section 102, any amendment of the Articles of Incorporation must comply with the requirements prescribed by the above provision. The amendment must be approved at the stockholders' meeting duty called for the purpose, by written assent of the stockholders, which is allowed under Section 15, is insufficiency. Section 103, when we say notwithstanding any contrary provision in the closed corporation articles of incorporation, bylaws, or stockholders agree. If the directors or stockholders are so divided on the management of the corporation business, directors, and affairs that the vote required for a corporate action cannot be obtained with the consequence that the business and affairs of the corporation can no longer be conducted to the advantage of the stockholders generally. The Commission, upon written possession by a stockholder, shall have power of abrogate the dispute.
In Section 104, this section outlines the rights of stockholders in a closed corporation regarding withdrawal and dissolution. A stockholder can force the corporation to buy back their shares at fair value but not less than or par issued value if the corporation has enough assets. Also, a stockholder can petition the Securities and Exchange Commissions or the SEC to dissolve the corporation if directors, officers, or controlling parties are acting illegally, fraudulently, dishonestly, oppressively, or if corporate assets are being misapplied or wasted. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. In Section 105, incorporation where education corporations shall be governed by special laws and by the general provisions of this code. Whereas in Section 106, about Board of Trustees, where trustees of educational institutions organized as non-stock corporations shall not be less than 5 or more than 15, provided that the number of trustees shall be in multiples of 5. Trustees thereafter elected to fill in vacancies occurring before the expiration of a particular term shall hold office only at the unexpired period. Trustees elected thereafter to fill in the vacancies caused by expiration of term shall hold the office for 5 years. A majority of trustees shall constitute a quorum for the transaction of business. The powers and authority of trustees shall be defined in the bylaws. For institutions organized as stock corporations, the number of term of directors shall be governed by the provisions or stock of or corporation. 107. Classes of religious corporations. Religious corporations may be incorporated by one or more persons. Such corporations may be classified into corporations sole or religious societies. Religious corporations shall be governed by this exact chapter and by the general provisions on non-stock corporations insofar as applicable. In Section 108, Corporation Sole, for the purpose of administering and managing as trustee the affairs, property, and temporalities of any religious denomination, sect, or church, a corporation sole may be formed by the chief, archbishop, bishop, priest, minister, rabbi, or other presiding elder of such religious denomination, sect, or church. Article 109. Articles of Incorporations. In order to become a corporation sole, the chief, archbishop, bishop, priest, minister, rabbi, or presiding elder or of any religious denomination, sect, or church must file the Commission's Articles of Incorporation setting forth the following, wherein A, that the applicant, chief, archbishop, priest, minister, rabbi, or presiding elder represents the religious denomination or church which desires to become a corporation sole. In B, that the rules and regulations of the religious denomination are consistent with becoming a corporation sole and do not forbid it. In C, that the presiding elder is charged with the administration of temporarities and management of affairs, estate, properties, and the religious domination within the territorial jurisdiction. In D, the manner by which the presiding elder is required to be filled according to the rules, regulations, or discipline of the denomination. In E, the place where the principal's office, corporation sole is to be established and located, which place must be within the territory of the Philippines.
Good day. This time we will proceed to section 110. This section explains how a religious leader, like a bishop, priest, or minister, can form a corporation sole. This is a special type of corporation for managing the property and affairs of a religious organization. The religious leader must prepare and file the articles of incorporation with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This document must be verified by affidavit or affirmation, meaning the leader swears that the information in it is true and authentic. It must also include a certified copy of the leader's appointment papers like a commission, certificate of election, or letter of appointment, verified by a notary public. Once the Secretary and Exchange Commission accepts and files these documents, the religious leader automatically becomes a corporation sole. This means that the leader becomes the legal representative of the church for all its properties, assets, and temporal affairs. Note that the religious leader does not personally own the properties. Instead, they hold them in trust, meaning they manage and protect them for the benefit of the religious organization and not for personal gain. Section 111. This section explains how a corporation sole can acquire, hold, sell, or mortgage property that belongs to the church. A corporation sole can buy, own, and hold both real property like land or buildings and personal property like movable items. These properties can be used for religious, charitable, benevolent, or educational purposes. The corporation sole may also receive gifts, donation, or bequests. Bequests are property left by someone in a will for the same purposes. If the corporation sole wants to sell or mortgage a property, they must first get approval from the regional trial court in the province where the property is located. The leader must file a verified petition or a written sworn request explaining why the sale or mortgage is necessary. The court must also see proof that there is a proper notice of the application that was given in a published newspaper or whatsoever, and the sale or mortgage is in the best interest of the corporation or the church. Any member of the church can object to the petition if they disagree with the transaction. But there is an exception. If the internal rules or laws of the church already specify how to buy, sell, or mortgage property, those rules will be followed instead and the court approval is not required. Section 112. This section explains what happens when the position of the religious leader who serves as a corporation sole becomes vacant or when a new leader takes over. When a new religious leader assumes office, that person automatically becomes the new corporation sole. The new leader just needs to file with the Securities and Exchange Commission a copy of their commission, certificate of election, or letter of appointment certified by a notary public. Once it is filed, the new leader can legally transact business and manage the properties and affairs of the church as the new corporation sole. If there is a vacancy, for example, when the leader dies, resigns, or the position is temporarily unfilled, The person or group authorized by the church rules will temporarily manage the affairs and properties of the corporation. This authorized person will have the same power as the corporation soul until a new leader officially takes office. Section 113. This section explains how a corporation's soul can be voluntarily dissolved, meaning it can legally end its existence as a corporation, and how its remaining affairs or properties should be settled. A corporation's soul can decide to dissolve the corporation, and to do this, the leader must file a verified declaration of dissolution with the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the contents of the declaration must include, first, the name of the corporation soul. Second, the reason for dissolving and winding up. For example, the church organization is merging with another, or the church is no longer needs to be incorporated. Third, proof of authorization from the religious organization, meaning the dissolution has been approved by the church or religious authority. Lastly, the names and addresses of the people who will handle or supervise the winding up or the process of settling the corporation's remaining affairs, debts, and properties. Once the Securities and Exchange Commission approves the declaration of dissolution, the corporation's soul is considered officially dissolved. It can no longer continue its normal operation except for winding up only, or settling the debts, affairs, or properties. Section 114. This section explains how a religious society or group like a diocese, synod, religious order, or church district organization, not just an individual leader, can become a corporation to manage its affairs, properties, and assets legally. Any religious society belonging to a church or denomination may apply for incorporation. This is allowed as long as it is not forbidden by the church constitution, rules, or higher authorities. The group must file articles of incorporation with the Securities and Exchange Commission. These articles must be verified by affidavit of an authorized person such as the presiding elder, secretary, or clerk of the religious group. The articles of incorporation must include the following details. Number one, that the group is a religious organization belonging to a denomination or particular sector. Number two, that two-thirds of its members have consented or voted to incorporate. Number three, that incorporation is not prohibited by the church authority or internal rules. Number four, that the purpose of incorporation is to manage the affairs, properties, and estate of organization. Number five, the address of the principal office or the main location in the Philippines. Number six, and last, the names, nationalities, and addresses of the trustees, not fewer than 5 and not more than 15, who will manage the corporation for the first year or for a term set by the organization internal laws.
I'll be discussing Section 115 to 119 of the Revised Corporation Code, which focus on One Person Corporation or OPC. Section 115. Applicability of provision to OPC. It explained that the provision under this specific title of the code mainly apply to one-person corporation. Other general provisions of the Corporation Code still apply, but only as supplementary, meaning they fill in if the gaps is something not covered in the OPC. So OPCs follow their own special rule first and the rest of the code only when needed. Section 116. What is one-person corporation? Section 116 defines an OPC as a corporation with only one stockholders.
This single stockholder can be a natural person, a trust, or an estate. However, there are restrictions. Certain entities cannot form or convert into an OPC. These include banks and quasi-banks, insurance company, pre-need companies, trust companies, public and publicly listed corporation, and non-chartered GOCCS. Other restriction is that a person licensed to practice a profession, like doctors, lawyers, or engineers, cannot form an OPC if the purpose is to practice that profession unless a special law allows it. Section 170. Minimum capital stock. It states that an OPC does not need a minimum requirements authorized capital stock unless a special law specifically requires it. This makes it easier and more accessible for individuals to start their own corporation. Section 118. Articles of Incorporation. Section 118 provides extra requirements when filing the Articles of Incorporation for an OPC. Aside from the usual requirements under Section 14, an OPC must include number 1, if the single stockholder is in a trust or an estate, it must state the name, nationality, and resident of the trustee or administrator and proof of their authority. Number 2, nominee and alternate nominee, their names, nationality, residence, and the extent of their authority. These nominees automatically take over in case of death or incapacity of the single stockholders. Section 119. Bylaws. Lastly, Section 119 states that a one-person corporation is not required to submit or file corporate bylaws. It is another feature that simplifies the structure and management of an OPC. In summary, Section 115 to 119 explain how one-person corporation work, who can form them, and the simplified requirements they enjoy. OPC were created to give individuals more flexibility and easier access to forming a corporation.
We begin with the most visible rule, found in Section 120, Display of Corporate Name. This section ensures transparency for the public. It simply states that the OPC shall indicate the letters OPC either below or at the end of the corporate names. This is not just a branding. It serves as an immediate notice to anyone dealing with the company that they are transacting with a one-person corporation, which is important for understanding the corporate structure. Next, we look at the OPC streamlined management structure in Section 121 and 122. Section 121 establishes the primary note. The single stockholder shall be the sole director and president of the one-person corporation. This centralizes all the policy-making and executive authority, making decision-making extremely difficult. However, the OPC still requires other officers. Under Section 122, the OPC must appoint a treasurer, corporate secretary, and other officers within 15 days from the issuance of its certificate of incorporation, and the SEC must be notified within 5 days of their appointment. Now, here are the two crucial exceptions regarding the single stockholder rules. First is the single stockholder may be the treasurer. If they choose to be the self-appointed treasurer, they must safely two non-negotiable requirements. First, they must give a bond to the SEC. Second is they must execute a written undertaking to faithfully administer and invest the OPC's funds. And the second is the single stockholder may not be in the corporate secretary. This brings us directly to the most critical role for the OPC continuity. The reason why the single stockholder cannot be corporate secretary is found in Section 123, Special Functions of the Corporate Secretary. These officers is essential because their duties deal with the very continuity of the corporation when the single stockholder is unavailable. The corporate secretary's functions are: first, they are responsible for maintaining the minutes book and the corporate records. Second, they must notify the nominees or the alternate nominee of the single stockholder's death or incapacity within the 5 days of its occurrence. Third, they must notify the SEC of the single stockholder's death within the 5 days, including the details of the known legal heirs. Fourth, they must call the nominee alternate nominee and the known legal heirs to a meeting to advise them on a crucial matters such as the election of the new director of conversion of the OPC. As you can see, the single stockholder cannot report their own death or incapacity. The corporate secretary must be an independent mechanism to ensure these vital notifications are made. Finally, we cover the OPC succession plan in Section 124, Nominee and Alternate Nominee. This system guarantees that the OPC can continue its existence. The single stockholder shall designate a nominee and an alternate nominee who will take the place of the single stockholder as director and manage the corporation's affairs in the event of death or incapacity. Crucially, the articles of incorporation must state their names and contact and details, and their written consent must be attached to the articles. Their term of duty depends on the circumstances. First, in case of temporary incapacity, the nominees sit as director and manager until the single stockholder, by self-determination, regains the capacity to resume their duties. Second, in case of death or permanent incapacity, the nominee sits as director and manager until the legal heirs have been lawfully determined and have designated one of themselves to act as the new single stockholder or have agreed that the state itself would be stockholder. This mechanism ensures that the OPC remains a functioning entity and its liabilities are handled properly during the transition of ownership. Sections 120 through 124 provide the critical legal architecture for the OPC. They cover its required public identity, the concentration of the power in a single stockholder, and the vital role of the corporate secretary and the nominee system in ensuring the OPC's transparency, governance, and most importantly, its continuity. Thank you.
Based on Section 125, term of nominee and alternate nominee. So this section is all about succession and management continuity when the single stockholder or the owner of the OPC can't run the company anymore. So it defines the job of the nominee and the alternate nominee. Nominee's role and team. The nominee is essentially a temporary manager appointed by the owner to keep the businesses running smoothly if the owner becomes unavailable. Temporary incapacity, for example, illness, injury, temporary absence. The nominee acts as the director and manager until the owner is capable again and decides to take back control. The nominee's job ends when the owner says so. Death or permanent incapacity. The nominee takes over and manages the OPC until decide who will become the new single stockholder. Nominee's role and team. The nominee is essentially a temporary manager, appointed by the owner to keep the businesses running smoothly if the owner becomes unavailable. Temporary incapacity. Example, illness, injury, temporary absence. So the nominee acts as the director and manager until the owner is capable again and decides to take back control. The nominee's job ends will the owner say so. Death or permanent incapacity. The nominee takes over and manages the OPC until the legal heirs, successors of the owner are identified by the courts and they formally decide who will become the new single stockholder. Or if the owner's estate itself become the single stockholder, the nominee ensures the business doesn't collapse during this legal transition period. Alternate nominee's role. The alternate nominee is the backup plan. The only step in to become the director and manager if the primary nominee cannot perform their duties. For example, if the nominee is also sick, dies, refuses the job, or is otherwise unable to act. The alternate nominee has the exact same term and conditions as the original nominee would have had. Based on Section 126, change of nominee or alternate nominee. This section makes it easy and flexible for the single stockholder to change their nominee or alternate nominee. Simple change. The owner can change their nominee or alternate nominee at any time they wish. Procedure. They simply need to submit the names of the new nominees and their written consent to the Securities and Exchange Commissions or SEC. No charter amended needed. The crucial part is that they don't have to amend the article of incorporation, the company's basic charter. This saves time, effort, and regulatory steps, making the process much faster. Based on Section 127, Minutes Book and of Meetings. These sections address how the OPC handles its corporate records and decisions, which is different from a regular corporation with multiple directors who need formal meetings. So, Section 127 Minute Book Requirement. The OPC must maintain a minute book. Purpose. This book serves as the official record for the company. It must contain all actions, decisions, and resolutions made by the single stockholder, since they are the sole director and shareholder. Based on Section 128, records in lieu of meetings, the non-meeting. OPC reality. Since there's only one own or director, there's no one else to meet with. Okay? So, simplified process. When a decision or action is needed, like approving a major contract or capital expenditure, the single stockholder simply needs to prepare a written resolution, sign and date it, and record it in the minutes book. Legal effect. The date that the resolution is recorded in the minute book is legally considered the date of the meeting. This allows the OPC to comply with rules that normally require a meeting without actually holding one. Based on Section 129, reportorial requirements. So this section outlines the mandatory reports that an OPC must submit to the SEC to ensure transparency and compliance. Required reports. The OPC must submit the following with the deadlines set by the SEC. First, annual financial statements. The official yearly report on the company's financial health. Second is President Report, a report on the company's operation and performance. The single stockholder is also the president. Third, disclosure of transactions. Details about the significant transactions the OPC entered into. The last one is the other reports. Other reports, any additional documents the SEC may require. Fiscal year and penalties. Reporting period. The reports must cover the fiscal year stated in the OPC's articles of incorporation. If no fiscal year is stated, it defaults to the calendar year January 1 to December 31. Consequence of failure. Delinquent status. If an OPC fails to submit these required reports 3 times, whether those failures are one after to the other or speed out within a 5-year period, the SEC can declare the corporation to be in delinquent status, so which carries and serve legal consequence of the businesses.
Section 130, the liability of single shareholder. So this section focuses on the responsibility of the single shareholder in a one-person corporation. it is unique because it has only one shareholder as opposed to a traditional corporation that has multiple shareholders. Section 131, Conversion from an ordinary corporation to one-person corporation. It explains how a corporation with multiple shareholders can be converted into a one-person corporation. If a single stockholder acquires all the shares of an existing ordinary stock corporation, they can apply to convert the corporation into one-person corporation. Section 132, Conversion from one-person corporation to an ordinary stock corporation. Section 132 covers the reverse process when a one-person corporation is converted into an ordinary corporation with multiple shareholders, so the conversion process will convert an OPC to an ordinary stock corporation. The company must notify the Commission within 60 days after the conversion event and comply with the requirements for stock corporation under the law. So let me give an example. If an OPC grows and the sole shareholder decide to invite investors to expand the business, they may convert the OPC into an ordinary stock corporation to accommodate multiple shareholders. A corporation can transition between an OPC and an ordinary corporation, depending on ownership structure and needs. Now let's move on. The dissolution of corporation, which is governed by Section 133 and 134. Section 133, Methods of Dissolution. This section defines the two main ways of corporation can be dissolved. Voluntarily dissolution. This happens when the shareholders or board members decide to wind up the business voluntarily. This usually occurs when the business is no longer profitable, or the ownership wish to retire or move on. Involuntary dissolution. This occurs when corporation is dissolved by court or order to regulatory action. This could happen if the company violates the law or fails to meet the legal requirements, such as failing to file necessary paperwork or pay taxes. Section 134 of the Revised Corporation Code discusses the process of voluntary dissolution, particularly when the corporation has no creditors to be paid and deals with voluntary dissolution of a corporation. When no creditors will be released, this section applies when a corporation wants to close down without owing money to anyone. Since no creditors' rights are affected, the law allows a simpler dissolution process. Examples: once the dissolution vote is passed and all the documents are submitted, the company waits for the Commission's approval. Once approved, the company is officially dissolved. So dissolution is the process of legally closing down a corporation. A corporation can be dissolved either voluntarily or involuntarily, with the legal process and documentation required clearly outlined. Examples: once the dissolution vote is passed and all the documents are submitted, the company waits for the Commission's approval. Once approved, the company is officially dissolved. So dissolution is the process of legally closing down a corporation. A corporation can be dissolved either voluntarily or involuntarily, with the legal process and documentation required clearly outlined.
This section outlines the process for the voluntary dissolution of corporation when the rights of its creditors be prejudiced. A verified petition for dissolution must be filed with the Commission of the Secretary and must be, number 1, signed by the majority of Board of Directors or Trustees. Number 2, verified by the President, Secretary, or the Director Trustee. Number 3 is resolved upon the affirmative vote stockholders representing at least 2/3 of the outstanding capital stocks or members. The petition must clearly set forth all claims and demands against the corporation, the reason for the dissolution, the form or manner, and the time when meeting notices were given, the date, place, and time of the stockholders or members meeting where the dissolution was approved. The corporation must also submit to the Commission. The number 1 is a certified copy of the resolution authorizing the dissolution. And number 2, a list of all its creditors. For the publications and objections procedure, if the petition is sufficient, the Commission will issue an order of fixing a deadline for filing objections, which must be 30 to 60 days after the order entry. The order be published at least once a week for 3 consecutive weeks. For 3 consecutive weeks in a newspaper of general circulation and the corporation's principal office location, or what we call nationwide. A copy, a copy of the order also posted 3 consecutive weeks in 3 public places in the same locality. Hearing and final judgment. Hearing. The commission will produce to hear the petition and any objection with 5 days notice. 5 days notice given after the objection deadline expires. As for the judgment, if no objection is sufficient and the petition's allegations are true, the commission will render judgment dissolving the corporation. In asset and disposition, the commission may directly disposition of the corporation asset as justice requires may appointed or appoint a receiver to collect assets and pay their debts. Effectivity. The dissolution is only effective upon the issuance by the commission of the certificate of dissolution. Dissolution by shortening corporate terms. A corporation can voluntarily dissolve by amending its article of incorporation to specify a shorter corporate term following the general amendment procedure outlined in the code. These are the key steps. Number 1 is the amendment. The corporation amends its article of incorporation to set an earlier expiration date for its corporate term. Submission. A copy of amendment articles of incorporation must be submitted to the commission of the secretary. Effectivity of dissolution. The corporation is deemed dissolved without any further proceedings like filing a separate dissolution, petition, or waiting for the final ruling. Once the short term expires, the date specified in the approved amendment articles, dissolution upon the term expiration, whether the original or term or shortened one, automatically takes effect on the day following last day of the corporate term. No certificate of dissolution from the commission is required for this type of dissolution to take effect. The dissolution is still subject to provision of liquidation winding up the business affairs. Withdrawal of request for dissolution simplified process. This applies to the voluntary dissolution where no creditors are affected. Form must be made in writing and duly verified by incorporation. Signature must be signed by the same number of parties to request a dissolution in the first place. Deadline must be submitted no later than 15 days from the commission receipt of the original request dissolution. Secretary action. Upon receipt of the withdrawal, the commission of the secretary will withhold any action on the dissolution request after investigation. It may declare a request deemed withdrawn, direct joint meeting, and whether to proceed with the dissolution, and issued any other appropriate orders. Withdrawal petition for dissolution. This applies to voluntary dissolution where creditors' rights may be prejudiced. Form must be an motion and must be similar in substance to the withdrawal of the request of dissolution, meaning it must be follow a verification signature requirements, and the deadline must be verified and filled prior to the publication of the order setting and the deadline for filing objection for the petition. Grounds for involuntary dissolution. A corporation can be involuntarily dissolved for the following reasons. Business operation failure is a number one reason because of non-use of corporate character, failure to formally organize a commence business within 5 years from corporation, and continues in operation having ceased operation for the period at least 5 consecutive years. Legal and fraudulent violation. Number one is lawful court order and procurement through a fraud, serious illicit activity, or finding by final judgment that corporation, creators for illicit purposes, and commission for illicit acts and tolerance of illicit acts. Forfeitures of assets for serious illicit acts. If a corporation is dissolved based on the serious illicit activity grounds, its remains assets after paying all the liabilities shall be forfeited in favor of the national government. Regulatory coordination. The Commission is required to give reasonable notice and coordinate with the appropriate regulatory agency before the involuntary dissolving corporation that fall under the agency special region's jurisdiction. This section 139 details corporate liquidation process, also known as the winding up period following the corporation dissolution. The 3-year liquidation period. Applicability. This rule, the corporation charter expire is annulled or forfeit or whose existence terminated in any manner. Continues for winding up. Even after dissolution, the corporation remains as a body corporation for a period of 3 years. Purpose. Its purpose is this 3-year period solely for prosecuting and defending suits, setting and closing its affair, disposing and conveying its property, and distributing its asset. Restriction. The corporation cannot continue the business for which it was originally established during this period. Appointment trustee. Conveying the power, beneficiaries, effect of conveyance, and once the property is conveyed to trustee, the corporation legally enters property terminates. Escheat of unclaimed assets. Upon winding up of corporate affairs, any remaining assets distributable to a creditor. Restriction on asset distribution. General rule, except for decreased capital and otherwise allowed by the code. Condition of distribution. Distribution can only be done upon lawful dissolution after payment of all its debts and liabilities.